In this video, I will focus on the function composition and a non-traditional way to find the domain of a function composition. I know the students having a hard time not just with finding a composition of two functions, but finding its domain. So I brought two functions in, f of x and g of x. Let's say f of x equals 6 over x minus 3 and g of x equals 1 over x. I need to find the function composition of f and g of x, and I need to find its domain. So first thing first, what do I do? When I look at the function composition, I see that function f is taking a first spot. Because of that, I call it a major. So my function f, because it's sitting in the very first spot, took the position of a major function. Now function g, because it follows the f, I call it minor. The formula for the function composition is f and g of x. So to compose function f and g of x, what we're going to do, we're going to take f, because once again it's leading, of g of x. And you can find this formula anywhere. When you will Google it, function composition, you can find the formula. But what's going to happen next? F of x equals 6 over x minus 3. Now we're talking about f of g of x. So instead of x, we need to use the g of x, which is 1 over x. So because function f is major, I use the format of that function, which is 6 over, and then there's an x when function was f of x minus 3. Now in my case, instead of x, it's going to be g of x. So instead of x, I will put 1 over x. That's my g of x minus 3. Now I just need to simplify the denominator. I need to subtract 1 over x minus 3. I'm going to do it on the side. Lowest common denominator will be x, 1 x, so there will be 1 minus 3x, and I'm going to do it step by step. So it will be 1 minus 3x over x equals, and then I need to simplify this fraction. You know that the fraction is actually division. So we're having a number 6 and we need to divide by the fraction. So I have 6 over 1, and I will rewrite it as divide by 1 minus 3x over x. Now I'm dealing with dividing of two fractions, and I will switch division to multiplication, 1 minus 3x, and then I can multiply straight across, 6x over 1 minus 3x, 6x over 1 minus 3x. So now I don't need any of this. That was just explanation of simplification of a fraction. So we got the function composition. So f and g of x equals 6x over 1 minus 3x. Now we're going to move to a domain. I'm not going to give you a definition of a domain of function composition. You can Google it, you can look it up in a book. I will tell you the way I'm looking at it. So the domain of function composition is domain of minor function and domain of function composition. The union of those two domains will give you the domain of a function composition. So what's the domain of a minor function? Our minor function is g of x, which is 1 over x. And what's the domain? the only restriction that we have on x is the 0, because remember we cannot divide by 0. So the domain of a minor function will be all real numbers, for the exception is 0. Now, domain of a function composition, our function composition is 6x over 1 minus 3x. So the restriction on that function, again, we cannot divide by 0, so our denominator cannot turn into 0. So 1 minus 3x cannot be a 0, meaning x cannot be 1/3. So that would be all real numbers for the exception of 1/3. So I will use a number line to demonstrate the exclusions. Once again, the 0 we have to exclude, and then 1/3 we'll have to exclude. So our number line will be divided on 1, 2, 3 segments, from negative infinity to 0, from 0 to 1/3, and from 1/3 to infinity. And I'll use interval notation to write the domain. So that will be from negative infinity to 0, union from 0 to 1/3, union 1/3 to infinity.